Welcome to this explainer. Look, today we're completely rethinking everything you've ever been taught about human flexibility. What we're looking at here isn't just based on a small handful of clinical case studies. This is drawn from 50 years of practice with hundreds of thousands of ordinary people. And after all that time observing movement at that kind of scale, the conclusion is crystal clear. It is time to completely shift our paradigm of the human body.
Okay, let's dive right into this. If you see yourself as a machine built of rigid, isolated parts, honestly, what we're about to discuss will make absolutely no sense. But if you consider that you're actually more like a fluid, dynamic weather system or a highly responsive spider's web, well, then it makes perfect sense. We're just asking you to apply a little flexibility right now to your very way of seeing the human form.
Before we get into the nuts and bolts, we've got to clear up a massive misconception. Standard stretching, it assumes your body is perfectly symmetrical, and it builds its techniques around that ideal. But nobody arrives symmetrical. We all have a dominant side, a history of old injuries, quirky movement habits. That asymmetry isn't a glitch. It literally is the system we're working with. Any stretching approach that assumes a perfectly idealized symmetrical baseline is structurally wrong before you've even taken your first breath.
Section 1. The machine illusion, a seriously flawed model. So to understand why this model is broken, let's look at the usual suspects. Here is the conventional stretching taxonomy, and you've probably done most of these, right? We have static stretching, where you passively hold a muscle, dynamic and ballistic stretching, using momentum, and PNF, adding brief contractions to force a deeper stretch. Now, these all seem perfectly logical on their own terms, but they share one fatal flaw. They are all desperately trying to answer a single question: how do we lengthen one specific muscle?
So, the crucial point here is that your body is absolutely not a machine made of isolated levers and hinges. The fatal flaw of standard stretching is assuming that a muscle can be lengthened as a local isolated event, completely independent of the rest of your system. It just doesn't work that way.
Let's toss out that rigid thinking. We are stepping away from the old lever and hinge model. Thinking your bicep acts on your elbow like a pulley on a crane. Instead, welcome to the reality of biotenseggrity. Think of a continuous, fluid, interconnected web. In this model, you don't have separate parts. You have a continuous fascial fabric with your bones essentially floating within this distributed tension network. If you pull on one single thread in a web, the entire web shifts.
Section 2. The spider's web, the reality of biotensegrity.
Welcome to the real, fully connected world of human biomechanics. In a genuine tensegrity structure, there is mathematically and physically no such thing as a local change. So when you do a simple, everyday standing hamstring stretch, you aren't just lengthening the back of your leg. You are literally reorganizing the tension in your entire fascial web, from the soles of your feet all the way up through the crown of your head.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the shift from just forcing range of motion to developing what we call tension literacy. True flexibility isn't about forcefully ripping your tissues to achieve a longer length. It's the ability to sense residual tension sitting uninvited in your system and deliberately switch it on and off. We use short static holds to trigger autogenic inhibition, basically signaling your Golgi tendon organs to naturally reflex and relax. It's all about tension switching on demand, driven by your breath and cross-lateral movement, not forcing yourself into a rigid shape.
Section 3. The internal weather system, understanding the flow. If the spider's web is our structure, the weather system is our flow. Did you know your lymphatic system, the cornerstone of your immune system, doesn't even have a central pump? No heart to push it along. It relies entirely on extrinsic pumping, your muscles contracting, your breath, and your joints moving. In fact, MRI research proves that applying traction to joints doesn't just stretch the muscle, it physically widens the joint space. Movement literally pumps fluid through your fascial layers. You are controlling your own internal weather system.
And this brilliantly illustrates the real-world impact of this shift. Take a cyclist who goes to a physical therapist complaining of pins and needles in their arm. The old machine model says, isolate the arm, treat it locally. But through the biotensegrity lens, this isn't a local shoulder issue at all. It's a whole system compression problem. The cyclist's rounded upper body is restricting blood and nerve flow. The fix isn't stretching the arm, it's lifting the chest, dropping the shoulders, and reorganizing the entire upper structure to get that circulation going again.
Section 4. The science of pandiculation, the natural stretch.
Let's look at something you do every day that proves your body already instinctively knows exactly what to do. Pandiculation. It's just the scientific term for that glorious, full-body stretch and yawn you do when you wake up in the morning. Notice what happens there. You aren't passively holding a static shape. It's a reflex, an involuntary, active co-contraction of muscles that builds to a peak and then releases. It's a natural animal instinct that resets your nervous system, completely unlike the forced, static holds we do in the gym.
The difference is honestly night and day. Conventional stretching is passive. You're forcing an isolated muscle to elongate, which carries a genuine injury risk. Actually, when you force a deep stretch without knowing how to control the tension, your muscle spindles detect that rapid movement and trigger a protective cramp just to stop you. Pandiculation, on the other hand, is active co-contraction that is reflexively sequenced. It's completely natural and safe.
But almost nobody trains this way. It's this massive, universal blind spot. We literally see Olympic sprinters doing static hamstring stretches right before they get on the blocks, which literature shows actually kills their explosive power. We see runners isolating shoulders during warm-ups. We see older adults risking falls getting out of bed because they lack tension control. At every level, we are missing this vital middle register, the ability to smoothly grade and switch tension on and off.
Section 5. Rebuilding the hamstring stretch. We call it the wave sequence.
Let's move to a practical example and rebuild the most common stretch in the world, the standard standing hamstring stretch. You know the drill. Stand up, hinge at the hips, reach for your toes, and just endure the pull for 30 seconds. This broken method treats the hamstring like an isolated rubber band and basically treats the entire rest of your incredible body as an irrelevant bystander.
So let's fix it. We rebuild it using everything we've just learned into a wave sequence. You start with the base reach, sure, but then you actively integrate the lumbar spine. It becomes a participant. Then you add a cross-lateral rotation in the upper body, sweeping into a circular arm pattern to pull that fascial web all the way out through your shoulders. You add light isometric contractions at your wrists and ankles, running multiple tension switches at the same time. And the absolute best part, all of this happens on one single unifying outward breath. You've just turned a boring, static stretch into a full-body tensegrity event.
We've covered a ton of ground today, shifting from rigid gears and levers to fluid weather systems and spider webs. The evidence is just overwhelming. Flexibility isn't about forcefully stretching parts in isolation. It's about tension literacy across your entire interconnected system. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought. If pulling one thread moves your entire web, how are you going to approach your very next stretch? Stop treating your amazing body like a machine of isolated parts and start exploring your internal weather system. Thanks for hanging out with me in this explainer.